ladies and gentlemen, if he's always in your mind and yet your phone stays silent, that isn't a sign from heaven. It's not divine alignment. It's not destiny trying to whisper. It might just be your soul trying to hold on to someone God never sent. Mental presence without communication isn't always love. That feeling you get when someone lingers in your mind day after day, hour after hour, but hasn't said a word to you in weeks or even months. It can feel like a sign. It can feel like destiny. But let's pause and ask the harder question. What if it's not love? What if it's just a lack of closure that your heart is mistaking for connection? Love is not meant to be one-sided. Love is not a mystery that leaves you questioning your worth, doubting your value, or wondering why someone who used to call you daily now scrolls past your stories in silence. If he is always in your mind, but never in your life, then something deeper is going on. It's not love if it causes you to shrink yourself, silence your own needs, or wait endlessly for someone who isn't showing up. The human heart craves resolution. We were created for communion, for clear connection, not confusion. In the Bible, we are said that God is not the author of disorder, but of peace. That includes your relationships. When someone is meant to be in your life, God doesn't send them with static. He doesn't send them with prolonged silence or emotional distance that leaves you overthinking every moment you shared. Love, real love, it speaks, it moves. And yet the world has taught many of us to romanticize the ache, to believe that the more we miss someone, the more meaningful it must have been. But not every ache is sacred. Some aches are symptoms of emotional wounds still healing. Some are signs that you've given too much of your imagination to someone who only gave you glimpses of themselves. That person might not even be thinking of you, while you're stuck replaying old memories and confusing that loop for love. In the Bible, we are said to guard our hearts because everything we do flows from them. If someone is always on your mind but refuses to be present in your life, you're leaking emotional energy into a place God never told you to pour into, and the enemy knows this. He doesn't need to destroy you outright. He just needs to distract you with someone who's unavailable, so you're too tired, too drained, too emotionally tangled to receive the one who is truly aligned with your purpose. Sometimes what feels like love is actually just your soul needing to be released. It's not love, it's the echo of what could have been. The truth is, if they were meant to love you, they would have made it clear. God does not call us into confusion. He calls us into peace, into mutual love, into relationships where communication is steady, not scarce. The presence of someone in your thoughts isn't proof of their place in your life. Don't mistake emotional noise for spiritual confirmation. Let God show you what real, God-aligned love feels like, because it won't keep you guessing. God created us for clarity, not confusion, especially in relationships. The more time you spend sitting in uncertainty, wondering what someone meant, why they pulled away, or whether they still care, the more distant you feel from the peace you were promised. God doesn't deal in half answers. He doesn't whisper love through silence or build trust through inconsistency. When something is from him, it bears his fingerprints, honesty, consistency, and truth. It's easy to assume that if you feel something deeply, it must be meaningful. That if you're thinking about someone all the time, there must be some spiritual reason for it. But deep feelings can come from deep wounds. And sometimes the confusion we experience isn't a sign that love is mysterious. It's a signal that we're stepping outside of the peace God designed us to live in. In the Bible, we are said that God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. So when your heart feels tangled, when your emotions are spiraling, that's not divine mystery. That's misalignment. Clarity is loving. Clarity is kind. Clarity says, I care about you enough to make sure you're not left guessing. That's what God models in every interaction with us. When he speaks, it's with intention. When he leads, it's with direction. When he loves, it's without fear or hidden motives. In the Bible, we are said that perfect love casts out fear. Not love that keeps you in suspense, not love that makes you question your own worth just because someone else couldn't see it. When you're in something healthy, godly, and mutual, you don't have to wonder where you stand. You don't sit by your phone hoping they'll come around or decode mixed messages for emotional breadcrumbs. Confusion isn't romantic. It's draining. It wears down your soul, and over time, it pulls you further away from the clarity God wants you to experience, not just with Him, but with the people in your life. Sometimes we hold on to confusion because we're afraid that if we let go of the mystery, we'll have to face the truth. And the truth might be that someone wasn't serious, that they weren't sent, that they were never fully in it to begin with. But truth, no matter how painful, is always a beginning. Confusion is what keeps you stuck. Love, the kind God shows us and calls us to reflect, doesn't come with guesswork. It shows up, it speaks up, it builds trust. In the Bible, we are said that two cannot walk together unless they are in agreement. You cannot build something real if you're constantly trying to make sense of silence. You cannot call it love if it leaves you anxious, waiting and hoping for crumbs of attention. God does not draw you toward what keeps you spinning. He draws you toward peace, toward truth, toward connection that brings life, not confusion. And when something is from Him, even if it requires patience, it will never make you feel like you're being emotionally starved. Clarity is His language. The enemy uses silence to stir obsession and self-doubt. It doesn't always take chaos or heartbreak for the enemy to get in. Sometimes all it takes is unanswered questions, a lack of clarity, a message left unread, a slow fade with no explanation. That silence begins to speak louder than truth if you're not careful, and soon your mind fills in the gaps with your own fears, your own insecurities, your own painful assumption. That's how the enemy works. He's subtle. He doesn't crash in all the time. Sometimes he just plants a thought. Maybe you weren't enough. Maybe they met someone better. Maybe if you hadn't said that, they'd still be here. And now, instead of being present with God, you're replaying conversations in your head, reading into every look, every pause, every moment that didn't make sense. That's not peace. That's torment dressed up like reflection. In the Bible, we are said to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Not every thought that enters your mind deserves space in your heart. Not every silent moment is meant to be interpreted as rejection. But when we don't hear from the person, we start hearing from the enemy. He distorts, he twists, he turns the unknown into anxiety and the silence into shame. And we start to think it's our fault, when in truth, someone else's silence often says more about them than it does about us. God never speaks through confusion. He speaks through clarity, through conviction, through peace. But the enemy thrives in gray areas. He wants you lingering in limbo, emotionally stuck between what was and what you wish it could have been. The longer you stay there, the more you begin to doubt, not just that person's intentions, but your own worth. You start trying to earn someone back or prove your value through silence. That's never how God intended love to work. In the Bible, we are said to be strong and courageous, not afraid or discouraged. That kind of courage doesn't come from chasing someone who withdrew without explanation. It comes from knowing who you are in God and refusing to let silence define your value. The enemy knows if he can keep you focused on someone who won't communicate, he can keep you from recognizing the ones who will. He can keep your heart tangled in what's missing, so you miss what God is trying to bring. You were not created to live in emotional suspense. You were not designed to chase closure from someone who walked away quietly. The enemy feeds on that kind of unrest. He offers truth. He offers a love that doesn't require guessing. And when your mind is filled with noise from silence, you have to ask, who am I really listening to? In the Bible, we are said that God's voice is still and small, but it never confuses. If what you're hearing leaves you anxious, restless, and doubting who you are, that's not God. That's the enemy using silence as a weapon. And the only way to break it is by turning your ear back to the one who speaks in love, not lack. Your mind can create 1,000 versions of someone who hasn't even picked up the phone to say hello. That's the danger of silence. It becomes a canvas, and your heart becomes the artist. You start painting pictures with memories, moments, and what-ifs. You fill in the blanks with fantasy because the truth is too painful to face. They're not choosing you, and you're still holding on. Not to the person, but to the idea of them. The mind is powerful, especially when it's missing someone. You start romanticizing the fragments, the way they smiled at you, the late-night conversations, the way they made you feel seen, even if just for a moment. And suddenly, you're not just remembering them, You're building a story where their silence must have a deeper meaning. Maybe they're going through something. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they're waiting for you to reach out first. But maybe they've just moved on and your heart hasn't caught up yet. In the Bible, we are said that the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. That's not to shame you, it's to remind you that feelings can lie. Just because you feel something deeply doesn't mean it's rooted in truth. Sometimes it's rooted in hope you haven't been willing to surrender. Sometimes it's rooted in fear that if you let go of this one person, no one better will come. But that's not faith. That's fear disguised as loyalty. You keep thinking about them because your soul is still trying to solve a puzzle that was never meant to be finished. You're trying to make sense of why they disappeared, why they lost interest, why they didn't choose you after everything. But maybe the why isn't yours to figure out. Maybe the answer isn't in their silence, but in your healing. Maybe God has been trying to turn your focus back to Him, but your thoughts keep circling someone who left you in emotional debt. In the Bible, we are said to set our minds on things above, not on earthly things, not on fantasies, not on unspoken words or unfinished stories. Your mind was not created to obsess. It was created to discern. But obsession is what happens when we're trying to get emotional closure from someone who isn't giving it. And the more you think about them, the more space you give them in your life. Space they aren't even asking for. You deserve more than someone who becomes present only in your imagination. You deserve someone who shows up consistently and clearly. Someone who doesn't live in your mind, but stands beside you in real life. But in order to receive that kind of love, you have to stop giving away your thoughts to someone who won't even give you words. In the Bible, we are said to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. That kind of renewal starts when you stop feeding the fantasy and start embracing the truth. That the right person will not need you to create stories to justify their silence. The right person will be clear, and until that person arrives, peace will never come from someone who's only present in memory but absent in reality. When someone really cares, they don't leave you wondering. They don't plant seeds of hope in your heart and then disappear like it meant nothing. Real love doesn't move in silence. It speaks. It shows up. It doesn't hide behind uncertainty or make you feel like you're asking for too much when you're just asking for clarity. The truth is, people make time for what matters to them. And when someone keeps you guessing, keeps you hanging, keeps you reaching out while they pull away, that's not love. That's inconsistency dressed up as potential. You can't build anything meaningful with someone who keeps you in limbo, someone who shows interest but avoids commitment, someone who gives just enough to keep your heart hooked but not enough to give you peace. That's not what God intended for your relationships. In the Bible, we are said to let your yes be yes and your no be no. That kind of clarity is love in action. It's not grand gestures. It's not complicated games. It's consistency, follow through, and mutual respect. If someone is serious about you, they make it known. They don't rely on your intuition to fill in the blanks. They don't expect you to carry the emotional weight of the connection by yourself. They reach out, they initiate, they confirm, and most importantly, they align their actions with their words. That's how love becomes a safe place, not a guessing game. Sometimes we confuse intensity with intention. We feel that spark, that pull, that chemistry, and we assume it means something real. But feelings can be misleading if they aren't matched with effort. Just because something felt magical in the beginning doesn't mean it was built to last. And just because someone once made you feel special doesn't mean they're meant to be permanent in your life. In the Bible, we are said that by their fruits you will know them, not by their charm, not by the way they make your heart race, but by the consistency of their actions. Love that's real doesn't keep you up at night questioning your worth. It doesn't leave you refreshing your messages, analyzing silence, or wondering what you did wrong. Love that's real doesn't play hide and seek with your emotions. It stands beside you in light and in clarity. And if someone's love comes with more confusion than comfort, more silence than security, then maybe it's not love. Maybe it's a lesson. Maybe it's a test. of how deeply you believe in what God has already told you about who you are. In the Bible, we are said that God is love, and his love is faithful. It doesn't disappear when things get uncomfortable. It doesn't hide behind excuses. It doesn't make promises it won't keep. If someone is serious about you, you won't need to beg for communication. You won't need to decode mixed signals. You won't have to chase what's already meant for you. Because when it's right, when it's aligned, when it's God ordained, it won't leave you wondering. It will give you peace. You weren't created to live in emotional survival mode, constantly decoding silences, overthinking text messages, and questioning your worth based on someone else's inconsistency. That's not connection. That's emotional exhaustion. And yet so many of us sit in that space, silently suffering, hoping that if we just stay patient enough, loving enough, or low mental enough, things will change. But true love doesn't demand that you shrink yourself to be tolerated. It invites you to stand in truth and be cherished for who you really are. When someone's lack of communication leaves you stuck in your own head, that's not your spirit speaking, it's your fear. It's the fear of not being enough, of being forgotten, of loving more than you're loved back. But fear isn't from God. In the Bible, we are said that perfect love casts out fear. Love, in its truest form, doesn't confuse. It doesn't leave space for torment. It doesn't have you waking up every day wondering where you stand. There is something sacred about being pursued with intention, something powerful about being chosen clearly, not conveniently. You are not meant to settle for crumbs of affection, holding on to small moments and silent gaps, just to justify staying emotionally invested. That's not patience. That's self-abandonment disguised as loyalty. You can't keep pouring into a space that won't hold you, and you can't keep hoping someone will find their way back when they haven't shown they're even looking. In the Bible, we are said to guard our hearts, for everything we do flows from it. When you constantly leave your heart exposed to someone who won't handle it with care, you're not just risking pain, you're risking the foundation of your peace. That inner chaos, the mental loops, the rehearsed conversations that never happen, the dreams built on unanswered questions, those aren't signs of love growing. Those are signs of you slowly losing connection with yourself while trying to stay connected to someone else. What God has for you will not require you to beg for clarity. It will not thrive on confusion. It will come with consistency, honesty, and peace. And peace doesn't mean the absence of conflict. It means the presence of someone who is willing to communicate through it. In the Bible, we are said to pursue peace with all people, and that includes being honest about your emotional needs. You don't have to lower the volume of your voice to be heard by the right person. The one who sees you, really sees you, won't need to be reminded of your value. They'll recognize it without hesitation. You are not asking for too much when you're asking for consistency. You're asking for what love is supposed to look like. And until someone is willing to meet you there, you're not obligated to keep proving you're worth it. You already are. The right connection will never make you feel like you have to earn a place in someone's silence. It will come with clarity, and it will bring rest to your spirit, not tension to your soul.